They're muting.
Go ahead and let people in. Hello, everybody on Facebook. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. You may want to come onto the Zoom. That way you can also participate. Hi there. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Good evening. We're going to get started in a minute. There we go. Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm going to give it one more minute because there's still people coming in, and then we'll get started. During the course of the conversation, if you have any questions, you may want to chat. You can private chat with me, so no one else will see your question except for me. No one else will see where it's coming from, or you can chat with everybody. If you want, you can raise your hand electronically, and we'll try and answer all of your questions. Okay. First of all, I want to welcome our host, our guest, Mrs. Shaindel Blasberg. Mrs. Blasberg and I have known each other at least over the phone for many years. This is the first time we're seeing each other through the power of Zoom. And actually, Mrs. Blasberg has done a couple of successful matches of friends of mine that I sent to her, which is wonderful. So thank you, welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So Mrs. Blasberg, where do you live?
I live in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, New York.
Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And tell me, my name is Rabbi Yosef Levin from Chabad in Palo Alto.
Right.
And I just, it's really a wonderful subject that we're talking about tonight. Let's start by talking about your background. Tell me a little bit about your Jewish background and how you, where did you come from? Where did you grow up, etc.?
Okay. So I grew up on Long Island. I grew up in a very typical American, Jewish American home. We acknowledged Friday night. I went to conservative shul. I had my bat mitzvah. One of the things is that my parents definitely brought us up with a very strong pride in being Jewish and connection to the land of Israel. And one of the things that, so we didn't keep kosher, we didn't keep Shabbos, but we acknowledged Shabbos. My mother lit Shabbos candles, usually when we were on our way to bed. So she was afraid maybe there'd be a fire. And so one of the things that I did unique for my own Jewishness was I graduated high school early and I went to live in Israel on kibbutz. Okay. And that was part of just my desire to deepen my Judaism or my Jewish experience or explore what it means to be a Jew. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. So you became Hasidic. What brought you into the Hasidic community?
Okay, so it was actually in my junior year of college, I went back to Israel and took my junior year abroad. And it was after the end of that trip that I realized that I had already explored many types of Judaism, right? Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. When I lived on kibbutz, I definitely read a lot before I got there and got to see what kibbutz was like. I was sort of left with a feeling like I know the importance. I mean, I felt it's so important to be Jewish, but I couldn't find a way to express it. Mm-hmm. And then a little light bulb went off in my mind, and I realized that I didn't know anything about Orthodox Judaism. And I made a commitment to myself to explore that. One of the things is when I was finishing in Israel, I used to go through Europe. So I did that the first time I was in Israel and the second time. And one of the things too, I was an art student. And so you spend a lot of time in churches. And I'd be sitting in these churches, you know, with these massive structures. And I just knew that a Jew's path to God was not in a building. Okay, and yeah, I went back to Buffalo University, is where I was finishing up. And I had made a commitment to myself to learn more about Judaism. And I actually made a commitment to keep kosher. I was already a vegetarian, and I had met people who kept kosher. And I thought, what's not a big jump, being a vegetarian and keeping kosher. And it was a social kind of decision at that point. Yeah. Okay.
And then slowly you got into a life of a Hasidic woman.
Yes.
Let's fast forward. You, as a profession, you chose to become a matchmaker, a Shadchanit, technically.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the word Chatran because that's kind of a generic term. Technically, it's Shadchanit. So what made you decide to get into that line of work of being a Shadchan, a matchmaker?
Okay. I think that many people, if you think about someone, if they match people up just in the regular world, like a blind date, and the couple got married, there's, I think for the next 60 years, a person has a deep pleasure from having brought two people together. So I think everybody always wants to, I think, have in their record that they made a successful shidduch, right? Okay. So basically, it was, I think it crossed my mind every now and then, just because of the idea. And I was having children who were now in this portion of their life going out on Shidduchim. And it was a little foreign to me. I didn't get married that way. The truth is, I moved to Crown Heights and I met my husband in an elevator. So it wasn't so. Okay, in the end, it became a shidduch, but it was really the way that unfolded was not typical for Crown Heights.
That sounds like an uplifting experience. Okay.
So I would tell you like this. There was one Saturday night, I had a very dear friend, and our daughters were good friends, and her daughter got engaged. And I went to the engagement party. And at the end of the evening, my friend turned to me and said, Shaindel, become a Shadchan. She said, become a Shadchan. She goes, you don't have to leave your house. It's social. You're good with people. Just do it. Okay. Next day, this is Saturday night, 10 o'clock. Next day, Sunday at about noon, 1 o'clock, my phone rings. Someone who knew me before I was religious from Buffalo and then moved to another, they became religious also. And I had a daughter living in that city. She found out I was a shot. No, she didn't. I don't know. She called me and said, would you find a wife for my son? At this period of time, I was living in Jerusalem. And I could not believe that within 12 hours, I didn't even hang out my shingle. I didn't hang out my sign. I already got a phone call. And I took it very clearly as a sign that my friend gave me a blessing, and it was already materializing. So I actually said that I would do it as an official Shadchan. Not just, as a friend or someone just finding. We spent the time, she gave over very honestly about who her child was. And my concern was I was living in Jerusalem, and to do this in Hebrew, I wasn't that level of fluent. So I was a little bit hesitant because he wanted to live in Israel and her son was in Israel. It ended up being at that engagement party, after she finished with me, a girl came to mind. And they are married today for many years. And that I just could not believe that this entire thing could unfold the way that it did. So I was always thinking, because this might come up tonight, how I started. I was thinking, why did my friend turn to me? And then I remembered, I didn't remember all these years. She had her daughter in Shidduchim, and her daughter was never getting a date. And she called me up, really distraught, like, I can't get my daughter Hannah a date. And she said, what could be wrong? And we talked, and then I asked her, did you ever check your reference list? And she ended up having someone else call all the references and found out there was a person who was, let's say, very conservative in their views, and her daughter was a little more out there, and she did not speak nicely about her. So what happened was she took her off. Her engagement was the next suggestion that went through, and her daughter got married. So,
okay, so that is a very, very powerful story, and I want to get into that a little bit more about references and resumes. I'll get into that, and because that's very, very important. And I'm also going to get into some very practical. I'm going to ask you for some practical suggestions for people looking for a mate, etc. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit more about the concept of being a shadchan. Can you describe to me what is the role of a shadchan? What does a shadchan do? Just in a broad sense.
Okay.
What does a shadchan do?
Actually, as I was thinking about this question, it wasn't so easy for me to answer it because you can wear many hats as a shadchan. But I want to say step one is that who is the real shadchan? Who is the master shadchan? That's Hashem. I am only, when I decided to do this kind of work, I call this my shlichus. This is I'm like his assistant. You know, I'm not, yes, we're going to use the word shadchan, but really, if this is a spiritual, mystical process, and God runs the show. Okay.
Okay.
That's
Having
number
said
one.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, my intention. I'm going to first think what my intention is as a shadchan, is that once I'm getting to know people, right? I have to network. Is that I should have the knowledge of the people, enough knowledge and experience of different individuals that I am going to be able to match people up who will appreciate and respect one another and enjoy being out together. I cannot know if two people are two halves of a whole. I cannot know. I'm not a prophet, right? I cannot know if they're b'shared. But I can match them up in a way that it makes sense, that this is really a ballpark opportunity for two people to go out, okay? That there's a lot in common, okay?
And then you figure that out and then you connect them.
Well, yeah, now in order to do that, so I was gonna say there's different ways when you, so first of all, I would then say, okay, I acknowledge that God runs the show, yeah? The second part is I'm gonna partner with the single. I'm going to talk only now about my responsibility, right? Not theirs. But they do have, if it's a partnership, it's a partnership. So my role will change from, I would say, it varies from single to single, and I guess circumstance and shidduch to shidduch. According to everybody's needs, things will be different on how I play the role. Okay. Sometimes it also includes, there might be other people representing them. It could be their rabbi. It could be a sibling. It could be their parent. It could be a neighbor. It could be a friend. So I will work with the team. Sometimes the team helps make things happen better and faster. But let's say if a person just calls me up, they know I'm a matchmaker, and they say, I heard about somebody, but I don't really know them, and I don't really know the person. They're, you know, if they don't know them either, they just heard about them, and then I can do some detective work to see if I can locate them. Okay, that's one way. The other way is they actually been told more directly about someone. They might even have their profile, as we say, and I would reach out to them. But if I do not have a personal experience of either person, I find that in all the years that I have done that for people, I have very little success. I don't know if I ever made a match that way.
So you're saying you're saying, sorry for interrupting, but you're saying basically that it's better when you already have you know the person, you've had some connection to them, and that way you know what they need.
Right.
I want to ask you a little bit about, you know, in the world out there, I mean, people look at matchmaking and shadchanim. People have all kinds of different views of what a shadchan is. Until recently, I got to tell you, until maybe 10 years ago, the concept of a shadchan was always looked at as a kind of old-fashioned negative thing that, you know, matchmaking putting people together. You got to go out and find your own match. And then, of course, with all the last 10 years, there's been a proliferation of dating sites and dating services and all that. The world is catching up. But I'd like you to address the benefits of going through of the matchmaking process, the traditional Jewish matchmaking process, over the typical dating that goes on in the world. And by the way, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions or comments, please, you can chat, put it privately on the chat to me, or you can put it publicly on the chat or on Facebook, comments if you like. Please feel free, and I'll try and get to all the comments and the questions. So go ahead.
Okay, so if I would put in a nutshell what the secular world, what the world in general does when it comes to dating, they're dating for an experience. They're dating for love. They're dating to meet a person where there's a certain kind of chemistry. It doesn't mean that dating goes anywhere though, right? It's dating, and they're not necessarily marriage minded, all right? So I'm gonna keep that simple. When we're dating the Jewish way, we're dating for marriage. We already have a commitment, a value system that includes marriage, family, or if it's an older couple, so it's just marriage, right? But we're committed to a certain way of life, and it's different. It has a goal.
So I'm interested in getting married, and not me.
I didn't hear what you said. What did you say?
So I'm interested in getting married, and
right.
I decided I want to get married. Why shouldn't I go to a bar and find someone that was also interested in getting married? Why do I want to go to a Shadchan?
The benefit is that in the process of using the Chatran, there is going to be an interview, right? And that person, the Chatran, is going to get to know you. And a Chatran will end up screening many things, and the chances are that when you're put together through a Chatran, you're going to have a lot more in common than this random person sitting next to you in the bar. Now, yes, there are people who've gone to a bar and they did get married to the person sitting next to them. But the chances of that happening are very slim. And that there's a lot more in common when you go through a matchmaker. Mm-hmm. It's not blind dating, okay?
So in other words, so you are, okay, go ahead, please finish that thought. That's very important. Go ahead.
It's not blind dating. It's not like just, I have a friend and you're the same age and this. We really go through many different things where a person holds on a spiritual level, right? What values they have, what are the 3 to 5 most important character traits they would like to see in a mate? Do they represent, what do they give to this relationship? What do they bring with their value system and their personality? How do they spend their free time? What is their vision? There's so many things that we already line up. I found that in this way, people can know so quickly if this has potential. I'm telling you, sometimes within 1 date or 3 dates, it's clear whether there's a potential for a deeper relationship.
Because by the time they're going out, by the time they're meeting, you've already done a lot of research and know that they're compatible, at least seemingly.
Right.
And then when they go out, so is it an arranged marriage? Does a father come to you or a mother come to you and say, listen, I need a date, I need a man for my daughter, so can you find her someone? And then the parents tell her, you're going out with this guy, this is who the Chatran is recommending, and this is who you have to marry. Because there are such people who believe that a Chatran is actually arranging the marriage for people. Is that the case?
No, that would be, no, it is not the way that we do it. And everybody always has free choice. And I would say even everybody always has free choice, especially the person who's going to be getting married. So although things can be arranged to different degrees, yes, in some other Hasidic communities, it is much more narrowed down than we're speaking about. But they can say no.
Right. And so what you're doing is making the introduction and finding out if they're compatible, but you're not telling them what to do after that.
No. I have to trust. I want to say a very important ingredient in the Chatran client relationship is that I trust them, that they know when something is good or not good for them.
Someone's asking, how do I find a Shadchan?
Okay, so
besides contacting you, which is a very easy answer.
Okay, so there are different sites out there, and there are a lot of sites. So we would have to, according, again, which site they would go onto would have to also do with their level of observance, all right? That's number one. So across the board, all across the world, there are Jewish dating sites. And that would be, and usually you pick a matchmaker from the site.
I would add to that you can call your local Chabad rabbi and tell him you need a Shadchan, and your local Chabad rabbi will help you find a Shadchan, I'm sure.
Okay.
One of the nice things about working with the rabbi, or the rebbitzin for that matter, is that they know who to direct you to, because there are some Shadchanim who are much more effective and some are less effective, and some who are very very caring and very knowledgeable and do the homework, and some less so. So it's important to know.
Do you know that there is Rabbi Yisrael Bernat in Montreal has been creating a network for people who are connected to Chabad houses and their Chabad rabbis, and he has a wide range of people.
And by the way, in Northern California, Chabad rabbis do have a private kind of dating thing, and we share information with each other, and that's one way of doing it. I want to ask you a lot of questions actually about the actual process and preparing for Shadchan and all that, but preparing for a Shidduch, I want to ask you about that, but I want to first of all ask you two questions before we get to that. First of all, a very mundane question. I don't know how mundane it is. So how many Shidduchim, successful Shidduchim, do you have under your book?
You mean how many chuppahs? You're asking how many chuppahs?
How many marriages, yes.
About 100.
That's pretty good. Okay, that's wonderful. Right. I happen to know that making a shidduch, it says in the Talmud that bringing two people together is like splitting the sea. So it's not easy. It's not an easy job. and of course, there's so many variables. Sometimes you think they're perfect for each other and they go out and it just doesn't work. And the other question I want to ask you is, how far back does the profession of shidduchim go? Shadchanim.
How far back? Wow. Okay, so
I think I know the answer. I think it goes back to all the way to the time of Avraham Avinu, our father Avraham. It's right in the Torah, right? Tell us about that.
Right, yes. So in the Parsha, the Torah portion of Chaya Sarah, we get introduced. It's time for Yitzchak to get married. Abraham needs to look for a wife, and he relies on Eliezer, his faithful servant, to be the one to go out to look for a wife for Yitzchak. And in this dialogue, we learn everything that we still do today in Shidduchim. It's all there. So first of all, there were the conditions. I know that Eliezer had his eye on Yitzchak, and he had a daughter who probably was lovely, and she had a God-fearing father. He probably had a God-fearing daughter, but he was from the Canaanites, and it wasn't going to work. So there were two conditions. One is that the girl should be from the family of Abraham, right? It should be from his family, because he wanted only his family, but his family would have the spiritual qualities that were necessary for Yitzchak. That there's something in their spiritual DNA that he was looking for. The other thing is that Yitzchak had a certain level of holiness, because the time of the Akedah, when Abraham was willing to shech his son, right? He had a certain status of holiness, and he wasn't really permitted to live outside the land of Israel. So whoever was going to marry him had to be willing to come back. All right? Those were the two conditions. So Eliezer goes on his trip, and he davens, he prays. He knows that he needs divine intervention. He gets a blessing. It could have been a 10-day travel, and he got there in one day. He was definitely talking to God all along the way. And here he is standing in the town, and he already makes conditions. I want the girl to do this, to do that, right? She's going to offer water to me and my camels. But as he was standing there and he was watching the people who were milling around and doing their chores, he noticed a girl. He noticed that this little girl helped a boy who was blind. She helped an old lady cross the path. And I think there was a boy who hurt his foot. She took the scarf over her head and she tied it around his foot. And then when she got to the well, Eliezer actually approached her. He had a herd. He had many camels. And he asked, would you give me water? Yeah. But he also noticed, and also offered to water all the camels, right? And he noticed something, that when she went down to the well, the water rose to her pitcher. Okay. So he asked for divine intervention, and she had divine assistance. So the truth is, when he was looking for those, Abraham was known and Sarah were known for their kindness. And Eliezer knew that he had to find a girl who excelled in those traits. And he knew he had met the girl who would be the wife of Yitzchak.
Do you get that sense? Do you get that sense when you're working with someone and you're getting to know them and you see they have certain character traits, and then you find, do you have that sixth sense that this is the right person here? How often does that happen to you?
I cannot give you percentages, but I will share that it has happened several times. There are times I think people will be great and I get excited and they don't. As you mentioned before, they might not. But sometimes I sense that they match, that they're going to get one another. They're going to appreciate one another. And one time I had someone come to me, and I was having a hard time actually finding a shidduch for her. For whatever reason, it wasn't going so smoothly. And then a guy came in, I interviewed him, and as soon as he left, I ran to the phone and I called her mashpia and I said, I met him. I met him. Now, that was pretty bold of me. All right. I know that it could have not been it. And they did get married. All right. I'm not saying it didn't happen once. There's just something about sensing. I can say that right now I have a couple who will be getting engaged in the next 24 hours. And I met the guy, I interviewed him. Someone sent me the girl's profile and they told me about her. But after I met the guy, something told me that this girl, number one is they actually looked very similar. And there was something just about the look in their eyes, their body posture. And then she did come for an interview. And yes.
Okay, I want to get into tachlis now. Let's talk about, okay. This is fascinating stuff. We could go on about this all night, but I want to get into tachlis. So step one, somebody is interested in getting married. They want to go and find a shidduch. What do they need to do, step one, to start preparing for a shidduch?
Okay. If they're not familiar, whether a person grew up in a community where shidduchim is just the way that it goes, is almost not any more prepared for a shidduch than a person who doesn't. Because it really requires a lot of introspection about who I am, where am I holding, you have to look inside yourself. It's a pretty raw and vulnerable space. What do I offer, right? What am I about? And there are definitely books out there. There's beautiful books on the Jewish way and, in love and marriage. And I could send like a book list to you. And if anybody's interested in getting their hands on some of those books, that will help guide them in the thought process. Even just looking at a resume or a profile and that questionnaire that's going to be used for you is also, I don't think that anybody who fills that out the first time it should only be a first draft. You know what I'm saying? It should be a process.
So tell me about the profile. What is a profile? What is a shidduch profile?
What's a profile? A profile is a two-dimension experience of a person. It will give their simple details of age, height, birthday. It will ask work, where they live, are they willing to relocate? In some of these profiles, it asks you questions of, like, do you watch movies? Do you watch television? Do you, things that you might want to do for entertainment, because some people have different ways. So you want to screen those things. But the most important part is the character traits and the values that you're looking for. And then your own personal self-description. And yes, the way that you spend time, your free time, right? So that's pretty much.
So what you mean, so you're writing on the profile really who you are, what your values are, what you're looking for in a mate, in terms of values. And this profile then becomes your like resume, and then is that shared? So let's say I come to you and I have someone. I wouldn't come for myself, thank God. I got to tell you, when we sent out this email yesterday about this, learn about the dating process, a guy sent me back and he says, someone that I counseled 35 years ago, and Baruch Hashem, kept their marriage together, helped keep their marriage together. Thank God, 35 years I've spent on keeping this one together. I'm not looking for another one. So obviously it's not about, I'm just kidding, it's not about me. But so I come to you, I'm a single, and I come to you and I say, okay, so I'm doing my profile, and now I give you this profile, I fill out this profile. What happens to this profile? What is done with it? What do you do with the profile?
Okay, well, again, I work within a certain population of people, right? So I have to, if we have a person that I can represent, but I keep this profile. I'm just saying, what I do when a person gives me a profile, as I am networking, okay? So that means I'm always juggling, meeting new people, doing work for the people who've already come to me. There's different places where I source people's and names. If I come across a person who I think is compatible, I can either send their profile to that person, right? But I would not, again, if I'm sending it to a stranger, I usually will call them first and talk to them before I even present someone's profile. I would want to hear.
It's not just being wholesale sent out to people.
No, I don't find, listen, God could make anything happen anyway, all right? But there has to be more flavor and content there. There has to be a more three-dimensional experience, I feel, to really go somewhere, okay? So it is a representation, but there has to be a person representing the person.
Hi, Shaindel, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I dropped out there because of my technology here. I think I'm back. Am I back? All right, sorry about that. That's my, that's courtesy of Comcast. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So the profile is private to you, and then you share it with whoever you feel be an appropriate person to share it to. I'm not sure what you said after I left.
Yes, basically that's it. And if they take a liking to what they see, you know what I'm saying? I can then take their profile and send it to the person.
I want to make a contribution here. I know that I'm interviewing you, and I know you have a lot of wonderful advice for people, and I've heard it. I just want to share one thing that I give, a piece of advice that I give to people who are starting out in the shidduch process. And what I tell them is, walk around for a couple of weeks with a notepad, or use your phone if you want. And over the course of the couple of weeks, start thinking about what's important to you in life. What are your values? And when a thought comes up, write it down without judgment. Just write down what's important to you. Looks important to you? Is money important to you? Is Judaism, et cetera, et cetera. And just write the thoughts as they come. And then take a day and start organizing. Once after a couple of weeks, you've written them all down, start organizing them, prioritize them. And what will happen is you'll have a list of your top 10. That list of top 10, whenever you're going to meet somebody potentially, you got to make sure, you got to ask and see if they have your top 10 values. If they have all of your first 5, that's a good place to start. If they don't, then don't bother, because if they don't have your first 5 values, then it's not going to work. We always compromise on certain things, but you got to make sure that your core values, your top core values are there, and otherwise you can't share a life together. How do you okay with that?
Yes, and sometimes I would even narrow it down to sometimes 3. Sometimes someone else has other values that we actually would be very complementary to our own life. And it sometimes, I feel like you have to be clear and at the same time be a little flexible. Okay.
Can you talk about religious differences? Would you ever think of making a shidduch between someone who is more religious and less religious, or is it very important that the religious levels be the same?
Okay, so if there's a couple who is in their early 20s, or like they're going to be raising a family, if there's a bigger gap between their religious observance, it usually is complicated. All right, it causes complications. But when couples are older and, God willing, more mature and more tolerant as we've lived our life, we know what's more important, less important. I think that when people have different levels of, their religious observance, that they can make it work if they are both tolerant people, okay, and that there's respect there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but they have to know going in what the differences are and that they can live with it.
That's right. Yes, they will have to seriously talk about it. And no marriage or relationship works if we're going into the relationship looking to change the other person.
Right.
Okay.
Do you work with religious and non-religious people?
I work with people who are stricter, and definitely people who are fairly religious. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So now we've got the profile in place. Mm-hmm. You have identified somebody who potentially looks like the right mate, and then you arrange a date. So the first date. So what is it that a person should be doing in a date when they're going out on a shidduch? Now, one of the things about a shidduch is they are approaching this very differently than a typical dating process, because, as you said, they're thinking about marriage. So what does a person do on a date? What are you looking for on a date? What are you trying to accomplish?
Okay, so let's say we're going to be realistic about today in dating. So we're going to talk about, is this a date in person or is this a date on Zoom? Either one works.
That's a very good question. Can you date on Zoom?
Yes, you can date on Zoom, and Zoom can do some really special things. You could actually end up going to Venice on your date. Zoom has special things that you can play games. You can do all sorts of things. The difference between dating on Zoom, it's not a full experience of a person. And the other thing is, it's a little more intense because you're sitting face to face. And we would say that a Zoom date, 45 minutes, there are people who've done a lot of research on this, it's enough. Where you might, on a first date, end up spending 2 hours sitting together, okay? But regardless, a first date is really what we call an icebreaker. You're not really you should not be looking to say, am I gonna find out if this person is for me? Your intention should be to make the other person comfortable. You wanna just warm up to one another, okay? So it's sort of lighter conversation, but also with substance to it, okay? And I think that anything that you might have found out about that person within the context of lighter conversation, use what you've learned about them to ask more about themselves. Just make them feel very comfortable and that you're interested in knowing them better, all right? On a first.
So do you believe in love at first sight? Love at first sight? Are you going out and trying to find 4th of July, or is it an intellectual process?
Well, I guess that goes back almost to the question when you ask the difference between secular dating and Jewish dating, right? I can't say it's not just going to be an intellectual process. And there is, when we're talking about love that's going to last. So that's not a love that happens, this infatuation type of thing. And infatuation is great, and maybe people think that this is really true love, or this is better than something that grows a little slower. But infatuation, I've done some reading on infatuation, and it has like a lifespan from like 10 minutes to 4 years. And once the infatuation disappears, what happens is people operate on an energy level, and not necessarily their relationship is based on a feeling. And if the feeling disappears, doesn't mean they built a relationship. Right. So you certainly cannot get married with your brain. Your heart has to be in it, but it's a different kind of experience. And I can just share that when you ask how sometimes do I know if somebody matches? So this is what I do know. When two people go out and I get feedback from them afterwards, I can hear in their voice, it's almost never a wow. If the ones that end up making it to a chuppah, they'll say, oh, that was nice. That was really pleasant. That was really comfortable. Oh, yeah, I think I'll try that again. There's something very calm. Because I'll tell you like this, if people who are b'sher, they're two halves of one soul, that, as we say, 40 days before conception, I don't know if everybody knows this, the soul is divided into male and female, and they go on their life journey. When they meet up, they were one soul at one time. So when you meet, there's a sense of coming home. And coming home, we all know home is the place where you're comfortable to be yourself. Mm-hmm. And I am telling you, you can hear in the voice, there was something really pleasant. And sometimes when I hear that, I know that this shidduch has real potential. Right. So,
what would be a red flag when you're meeting with someone? Things seem to be going well, but could you talk about red flags that a person should be looking out for when they're going out?
Okay, a person. So if you're using a matchmaker, usually you will follow through with the matchmaker to give your feedback. If a person takes a few days in getting back, that's not a good sign. If a person is late without letting you know, that's not a good sign. If they display anger, all right, it's not a good sign. If they're busy only talking about themselves and not showing interest in getting to know you, it's not a good sign. You know, they say sometimes spill the way they treat the waiter is, is the way to find out if this person, is really a nice person.
Okay, I lost you there for a moment, but here you are back. Can you hear me? Okay.
But again, if it's the person seems to be evidently not thoughtful, but the opposite, inconsiderate and very busy with themselves and not so thoughtful, yeah.
You know the joke about that, don't you? About the couple that get together the first time and the guy's talking for 2.5 hours about himself. He won't stop talking. Finally, he comes up for breath after a couple of hours and he says to her, he looks at her and he says, oh my goodness, I've been talking too much. Your turn. So what do you think about me? Anyway, okay. Tell me about family. So you're going out with a person and you like the person. How important is family, to get to know the family? How important is compatibility with the family? Is this something that you're looking beyond just the immediate person?
I guess there has to be honesty there. Meaning is if a person doesn't have the best relationship with their family or there's dysfunction in their family, to find out how they have handled it, yeah, and what their expectations would be of their spouse to be involved with their family, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think everything has to be in place with the family, but it's how that person has learned to deal with their family and their expectations of their future spouse. Okay, and it has to be something discussed. I mean, in truth is, we know that even our forefathers, are just speaking about Abraham, and that they didn't have, you know, Rivka, who was chosen for Yitzchak. She didn't come from the best family. Her brother was not so, you know, honest. Neither was her father. So it really, you know, in that sense, if a person could be a great person coming from a family that might be very complicated. But you have to see where they're holding in relationship to what their family is and what they have done with it.
What should a person do that they're trying and they're working on finding a shidduch and it's just not going? Either they're not finding someone to go out with, or they're going out and it's just not working. You know, perhaps someone who is young, or even someone who's a little bit older, and they're just having a hard time. What would you suggest to them?
Okay. Okay, that has many dimensions in an answer. So before we were talking about the role of the Chatran, and I said that I partner with the single, right? So a single, besides just going out, it's important. I mean, we're talking about receiving the other half of your soul. It's the biggest gift that you can get. And if there seems to be obstacles in getting there, a person should look in different ways where the obstacles might be. And perhaps they would take things on spiritually, or commit to other things that would better themselves. Maybe they don't get to meet new people, and they'd have to go out of their comfort zone and do things where they get to meet other new people. So there might be new possibilities. Taking on a dating coach is a great thing to do.
Joseph Levin is muted. He keeps talking.
Sorry, what I did was I went to another computer. I went to my phone because my computer wasn't working. So I'm back. I'm on the phone. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay, but so someone tell me, what would you say to someone who calls you and says, I'm just not finding it. I'm not finding a match. Nothing's working. What's the first thing you would say?
I would ask them what they're doing. What are they doing to find a match? You know, and we'd have to go over what they're doing. Sometimes
you know what I've heard from people? Well, God is the one who makes the match, as you said. So it's up to God.
Well, if it's like the person who wants to win the lottery, if they don't buy a lottery ticket, they're not going to win, correct? There's no chance. Right. So if a person would like to meet people and like to go out, if they haven't changed anything in their life and very few people know them, or they're never going out, or they don't even let people know that they're looking, yeah. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be you go even meet another, let's say, matchmaker. Sometimes you have to go to an event where there are like-minded people like you, but an event that there's going to be new people there, so that you grow your circle of acquaintances. Like there's so many.
You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to do your part to get out there and make it happen. You can't just you can't sit home and wait for it to happen.
Right. And also on a a spiritual level, if there's so many different things we can take on ourselves, right? That could help make us better versions of ourselves, and doing things like that also draws down the blessing. Mm-hmm. Being kinder, more giving, more generous.
Okay. Does it cost money to get a shadchan?
It can. Different people work differently, and on the sites usually they'll let you know what the policy is. I personally charge for the interview, And then, I mean, it should be known that a Shadchan does get paid. If they make a chuppah, they get paid. And different people have different fees. And they should, before they start working with a Shadchan, to be asked how do you work and what's your monetary, expectation.
Right. And as a matter of fact, I want to say that it is traditionally considered to be extremely important to pay the Shadchan. Even a Shadchan charge, you got to give them something and pay them something.
Right.
Many stories about that. People didn't pay the Shadchan, and it's not spiritually a good thing. So they say that once the Rebbe once, I think the Rebbe once said that Shadchan's money, that we pay the Shadchan, is the most well-earned money. I mean, person brings you together, finds you your mate in life. What could be greater than that? Getting back to the actual dating process. So at what point is it comfortable to start? At what point do you know, is there a certain number of dates when you start talking about serious discussion, like religion, like children, like how many children you want, what kind of work, where do you want to live? I mean, when do you get, you said, okay, well, you've got the first time, you're just breaking the ice, you're trying to get to know the person and see if you're comfortable. At what point do you start getting really serious and having serious discussions?
I think that you start to bring up different topics from the second date and on, but I would not make a date all about serious topics. In relationships, there's many aspects of connecting, and so every date can have a light side to it with a more serious side, but we don't usually, if we're dating for marriage, we need to cover the issues of marriage, of family.
Now I'm going to ask you another question, okay? How is it possible? Are you there? You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
On the phone, the other one.
I got it. I see them. You're over there. Okay.
What I'd like to know is, how is it possible to meet someone a few times and know you want to marry them? I mean, to put it in a different way, in a kind of crass way, how can I marry someone I've never touched? How do I know I'm going to really relate to this person for the rest of my life? We're talking about love, marriage, joy, sharing a life together. You go out a few times and then you decide to get married. How can you ever really know somebody that way?
You don't. I don't know.
So I marry someone.
But you know enough that I would not go forward in a relationship if there wasn't that sense that you've met the person that you want to live your life with. You don't have to know everything. You're going to have a whole lifetime to know one another. I'll say something a little bit different. You can know one another from the aspect you're sitting as two single people getting to know one another. But to know the you as a married person, we ourselves, before we're married, don't know exactly how we'll be when we're married. And the Rebbe even says it, that you're the only relationship, no other relationship in your life, parent to child, siblings, or friendships, marriage brings out something different. And there's always going to be challenging parts. And it's the commitment to the marriage. If you committed, and we're talking about the Jewish way, if you two halves of one soul, you have met your other half. And this is the best way to complete your mission here in this world, is by being married to the person who you have a completeness to. And that I would say that if you can figure out that you have certain commitments and ways of communicating that you feel that will lead to a harmonious relationship, and you have ways of resolving conflict, then I think you have a drawing of the heart. There has to be a drawing of your heart. You want to see just a physical attraction or something deeper than that. You don't get married just on theory.
Okay, so you do get emotionally connected to people.
Yes.
You just go out a few times and get to know someone. I mean, and talk intellectually about this, that, and the other, and then you are getting to know the person and you are emotionally connecting to the person.
Right.
So I think what you're saying is that it's much more than just physical attraction or immediate attraction. Life together is much deeper than that, and there's a lot more to it than that. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a true, deep connection and love that grows over the years, as opposed to just immediate attraction. And that is, that you're saying is more important, and that you can accomplish by really getting to know someone through the shidduch process.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to stop and ask if anybody, I have a couple more questions, but I want to ask if anybody else would like to, I'm having a little bit of technology issues here, but okay. Someone asked a question. Why is if you want to ask a question, please go ahead and chat either on Facebook or in the chat, and I'm getting the questions sent to me as this is going on. Why is the content of these dates different than the content of secular dating? This is a question that I've just been asked.
Okay, well, in secular dating, I don't think we focus so much on our goals. And I mean, from the reading that I've done and what I understand, you can end up, how do you say, people date for a long time, they can live with one another for a few years, they get married, and very shortly after they get divorced. Why? They spent so many years together already. But there's something missing. And I've read several times how people never even brought up if they want to have children or not. Like, there's some very deep issues that they just never discussed. They were sort of like playing, like they were living in the moment. They weren't looking what they're going to do together, to build together, right? And so it's different.
Right. So when you're out on a date, you want to find out about the person. How do you ask questions without sounding like it's an interview? I've actually had that complaint from people. A woman went out with someone that I recommended they go out with, and she said, she came back and said he was interviewing me. And I asked him about it. He says, well, I want to find out about her. So how do you create that balance?
So I think that we all know that some people by nature are just smarter with people. Like, they're people. They're just good with people, right? And other people are a little more awkward. So it's good for those people who are more cerebral and less, not as good with people. If they know beforehand, they could do some role playing. And the other thing is, sometimes instead of asking sort of a blanket kind of question, like a general question, you already know some things about the person. And let's say they recently got a new job, or they moved out of the city. So you can say, hey, you were living in New York City for so long. What is it like to live in suburbia? And what went into that decision? Why did you move? You're taking an interest. You might want to say, well, why did you move? Or you could ask it like, what, but you want to make it more personal. And you could do that with any question. Sometimes you want to bring up a topic to talk about. You share something about yourself and that topic, and then you ask them. You introduce the topic, not asking just a question. It has to be more personal. But I will say, sometimes when a person isn't the best at it, if you have a little patience, things could change. You know what I'm saying? It's like sometimes the skills it takes to date isn't necessarily like the person who's really fluid and like almost a professional dater. You don't really want to marry the person who's a professional dater, right? They're good at that, but it takes a whole different set of skills to get married. So.
Right. Okay, I got a couple of other questions I want to get to quickly because we're running out of time. With COVID-19 going on, how do you meet new people and form relationships?
Well, okay, I didn't fully hear the question. With COVID-19, what was the question?
You meet new people and form relationships.
So if you're using a Chatran, right, it didn't change what I do. What was more difficult was finding a way for them to meet. All right, so let's say they started on Zoom. It doesn't stop it. You can still be meeting people. I had a lot of couples that got married. They had to be creative. they met a number, they talked on the phone, they met on Zoom, they did it again. And one was after 5 dates, they both traveled 2.5 hours. Yeah. One from New York, one from Virginia, and they met in a public park. And one of them decided that with the information, and questions they had, they weren't going to go further. I have a couple that got
What
married.
I heard you say is you got to be more creative. You got to get out there, but it's possible to do it.
Well, a lot of dates. What was harder was COVID was in the winter time. Then it was really hard because if you needed to be only outdoors, it was cold. So sometimes there were people who actually gave their homes for people to date in. Yeah, they found a place. Now when the weather's warmer, you find a lot of people taking long walks.
I want to
But
say
you cannot date only on Zoom. You have to meet in person.
I would say my advice to people is meet on Zoom to get to know if you like each other, but don't get off Zoom as soon as you can and meet in person as soon as possible.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, long distance relationships. Someone is asking about long distance relationships. How do you make a long distance relationship work? It's very hard because on Zoom, you don't really get the full dimension. You get a two-dimensional person. You're not getting a full person.
Right.
Is it possible to date over long distance and make it work?
You have to meet in person at different times. I don't even care if it's a Sunday that you both fly to the middle of the United States in some city and you go on a 4-hour walk together. Okay, but you cannot, it is not beneficial to either one of you to keep investing on Zoom if you have not met in person. There's just an aspect of one another you cannot experience until you meet in person. And that has to fall into place. So,
That's
but
hard,
I think that,
but it could be done, I guess, if people are willing to travel.
yeah, they have to be willing to travel.
There's a couple of personal questions that I'm going to suggest people direct to you directly.
Okay.
Can you please give your contact information?
Okay. Right now to give it, you're saying?
Yeah, give your contact information. And Shira,
Do I put it in the chat? Is that what I'm doing?
you can include in the chat or just say it.
Okay.
We will get this and we will pass it on to people.
Okay. So you're saying I should just say it? Yeah, is that what you want?
Yes, please.
Yeah, she can do both. She can say it and she can put it in the chat.
I will put it in the chat too. So first of all, my email is under the chupa. It's one word, under the chupa, CHUPA.
I love it.
Okay, just CHUPA, don't put an H on the end, don't double the P's, @gmail.com.
Yes, okay.
The best way to reach me, as long as WhatsApp is still as it is by calling my number and contacting me on WhatsApp. So that would be 917-500-9506.
Okay, now I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I want to say that if anybody wants to get access to the recording of this, please email to office@chabadgsb.com. office@chabadgsb.com. Also, in case you forget who to email to, you can email your favorite rabbi @gmail.com. I also made an easy one to remember, like you did under the chuppah. Your favorite rabbi @gmail.com. I have to say that the reason that I asked Shaindel Blasberg to join me on this discussion, this topic, is because whenever I have spoken to her, I've spoken to you about Shidduchim, I have found that you've been personally involved, personally caring. You've made a couple of Shidduchim that are very successful. They've just had their, I think the second kid, they just had one of the Rachel just had her second kid, and you really do care. You really do. I mean, it's coming through in your conversation. You really care about people, and it's not just a job. It's not just putting people through. It's really a wonderful thing. And I love what you said, that you feel like you're their representative. You're not just putting people together. You're representing them. which is a wonderful thing. So I highly recommend that people get in touch who are interested. And there's a lot more that could be said. We have to wrap up. But I want to thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. This has been a very informative thing, very informative evening. And if there's interest, I might want to do a follow-up because I have a lot more questions for you. And if that's okay,
Okay.
let's do another one. Someone
Thank
wants.
you for giving me the opportunity.
All right, thank you. Can you just put your email on the chat, please?
I did put my email on the
I
chat.
mean your phone number on the chat.
Okay, I'm going to do that next. I did. Okay.
Now, also, by the way, it's going to be on our YouTube channel. And if anybody, we're going to be doing more programs like this every Tuesday night. It used to be cooking every Tuesday. We're moving to cooking on occasion. We're still going to do cooking on occasion, but we're going to doing interesting interviews like this. I want to thank Shira Ponce, my assistant, who's really put all this together. And you'll find the Palo Alto Torah Studies YouTube. And you can look for Palo Alto Torah Studies. You'll be able to see this on YouTube. And we're going to do, anyone has any ideas for other programs you'd like to see? We're open to suggestions. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And once again, thank you, Mrs. Blasberg, for a wonderful evening. And I wish you Hatzlacha in your Shidduchim and in
Thank
your
you.
personal life. And thank you, and let's keep in touch.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you, Shaindel. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Very, very informative, interesting.
Thank you.
Shaindel.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.